I'd like to make a very warm welcome to you all to Arthouse Gallery tonight. It's wonderful to see this large community of people coming together to celebrate the launch of Cape York artist Naomi Hobson's glorious exhibition, Language of Land. My name is Ali Yeldam and I am the director of the gallery, and it's my great pleasure to introduce our special guest to you. Please can you make a very warm welcome to Naomi Hobson. Naomi. Noeline Timbery, chairperson of the La Perouse Aboriginal Land Council, and Dr. Shireen Morris, director of Macquarie University's Radical Centre Reform Lab. We are extremely fortunate to have these impressive women with us tonight, who are each making significant contributions to change within our nation. I'd like to also acknowledge Peter McAvoy from Wentworth for the Voice and acknowledge the support of Allegra Spender MP and her office, who have given us great support for this evening's event. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and future generations, and all First Nation and Torres Strait Islander people with us tonight, as we show our gratitude for this important creative ground on which we stand. For the last 26 years, Arthouse Gallery has established an important platform for the voice and vision of contemporary visual artists. During this time, we have been committed to sharing the art, stories, history and culture of an exceptional group of Aboriginal artists, to expand and offer a greater understanding of our First Nations people's voices and perspectives with our Sydney community. We have always held the greatest respect for their art and cultural practices, and acknowledge the strength and resilience that has enabled them to remain the oldest continuous civilization on Earth, dating back to 65,000 years. We acknowledge the cruelty, burden and disadvantages of our colonial history, and admire the strength, determination to overcome these adversities and disadvantages to build community, identity and agency in the modern world. We believe that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Indigenous heritage and knowledge is our most valuable asset and is integral to our national Australian identity. In a few months' time, we will all be voting on a referendum which will ask us a simple question. Do we as Australian people agree to recognise our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people in our Constitution, and for them to have an advisory, non-binding voice in our Australian Parliament? Many of us are seeking a greater knowledge and understanding of the voice, and it's for this reason that we have invited Noeline, Naomi and Shireen here tonight to share their personal stories and what the voice means to them. I'd like to invite Noeline Timbery, chairperson of the La Perouse local Aboriginal Land Council, to speak and make her welcome to country. Noeline is a proud member of the Timbery family, who are one of the most recognisable families in the La Perouse community, and they have a long traditional and cultural connection to La Perouse, coastal Sydney and the Illawarra. Noeline is a respected leader who advocates for self-determination, empowerment and prosperity for her community, which is built on culture and unity. Please welcome Noeline.
Thank you, Ali. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Ali said, my name is Noeline Timbery. I'm the current chairperson of the La Perouse Local Aboriginal Land Council. Sorry, I just got a little bit distracted. We are gathered here on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I ask that you join me in paying respects to Gadigal elders past and present, and on their behalf, I welcome you here tonight. No crickets already? No? Sorry, you're waving and I'm not sure. We clearly just don't know how to take direction, do we? The Welcome to Country is our modern interpretation of seeking and receiving permission to visit areas beyond our traditional lands. It is a ceremony recognising the cultural and spiritual connections to country and an opportunity to reaffirm our ongoing relationship to our land and waterways. It allows us to pay respect to our elders, to reflect on our history, and to build a vision for a prosperous and reconciled future. And isn't that all what we all want? As Ali said, my family, like many in my community, have traditional, ancestral and cultural connections to coastal Sydney, the Illawarra and the Shoalhaven areas. We consider this our country. Where once our people lived freely within our country, in 1883 our old people were moved from traditional camps in and around Sydney Harbour and Botany Bay to our community's present site at La Perouse. In the late 1890s, our ancestors at La Perouse were described as all that remains of the descendants of the native tribe that occupied the district at time of English occupation in 1788. And today our community is described as the only discrete Aboriginal community in the Greater Sydney area. We are among the first of this country's First Nations people to be impacted by European arrival. Yet we remain connected to country, to our traditions, and to continuing and sharing our culture and cultural practice. We are part of the world's oldest living culture, and that's something I think all Australians should embrace and be really proud of. And yes, we're here tonight to open this beautiful exhibition by Naomi Hobson, Language of the Land, and it really is beautiful. And also to discuss the proposed Voice to Parliament. This is where I get a little bit stuck because it's not my place to tell anyone how to vote. This is, after all, a democracy and it's what makes our country great. But I would just hope that you carefully consider the options and the impacts of what is being proposed and that you use your right to vote effectively. I will say this though. As Ali said, today is National Sorry Day, a day to acknowledge and reflect on past government policies and practices that forced Aboriginal people, Aboriginal families and communities apart. Policies that led to stolen generations, practices that led to intergenerational trauma for many Aboriginal families and communities throughout all of Australia. And so I'd like to end by sharing with you the final paragraph from the Uluru Statement of the Heart. In 1967 we were counted. In 2017 we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. I thank you all for being here. I thank you all for supporting this and for coming here with open hearts and open minds, and I hope that you carry that through. On behalf of the La Perouse Local Aboriginal Land Council, my ancestors and my people, I welcome you all to the traditional lands of the Gadigal people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful welcome, Nolene. I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Shireen Morris. We're enormously grateful to have Shireen with us tonight because she is one of the most sought-after speakers in Australia at present. She's everywhere. Shireen is the director of Macquarie University's Radical Reform Lab. She is a constitutional lawyer and teaches constitutional law, constitutional reform and Indigenous constitutional recognition at Macquarie University. She's the co-author of the book A Rightful Place, A Roadmap to Recognition. She has advised the Cape York Institute for the last 12 years and worked closely with Noel Pearson since 2014 to help devise and advocate the concept for the voice. Shireen shares a strong connection to the country of Cape York, which is Naomi Hobson's homeland. And tonight she will share her story of how the Voice was conceived as a solution to the deadlock on constitutional recognition and the road that she has travelled towards the referendum. Thank you. Please welcome.
Hi everyone. Thank you for that amazing welcome. That was beautiful. And thank you to the Arthouse Gallery and Naomi for inviting me to speak here today to make some remarks for your incredible exhibition tonight. So I want to talk to you about the upcoming referendum to recognise Indigenous peoples by giving them a constitutionally guaranteed voice in their affairs. So my name's Shireen. I'm a constitutional lawyer of Indian and Fijian Indian Australian heritage. But as has just been said, I share a bit of a Cape York connection with Naomi. And back in 2011, long time ago now, I went up to Cape York as a young law intern and met the Indigenous leader, Noel Pearson. Now, Noel must have been impressed with the work I did over those uni holidays because he randomly offered me a job working on Indigenous constitutional recognition, and I went on to work for Cape York Institute for the next 7 years. Now, the first thing I learnt working at Cape York and learned from the Cape York people was that Indigenous Australians were not represented in the constitutional conventions that founded the Australian nation. Though they lived on this continent for over 60,000 years, the Constitution contained clauses explicitly excluding them and has presided over decades and decades of discrimination against them. There were laws denying Indigenous people the vote in some jurisdictions right up until the 1960s. Government policies withheld Indigenous wages, removed Indigenous children from their families, controlled where they could live, who they could marry, sometimes banned languages from being spoken, even dictated whether or not they could buy a car, and of course denied their property rights. And we all know there was violence. There was bad violence towards Indigenous people throughout the process of colonisation of this country. And so learning about that history, I came to understand that because of that history, Indigenous people didn't want some merely symbolic recognition in a miserly preamble. They didn't want a preamble that would make no difference whatsoever to their lives. For decades and decades, for probably the last 100 years or more, Indigenous people all around the country have been asking and asking for substantive constitutional recognition to create a fairer power relationship between Indigenous communities and Australian governments, something that would help the future be fairer than the past. So back in 2011, with my naive, fresh out of law school human rights brain, I looked at the racist provisions in the Constitution and I looked at the history of racism that Indigenous people have suffered under the Constitution, and I thought, you know what, we need an equality guarantee. We need a racial non-discrimination guarantee, much like Western democracies have all over the world. But Australia doesn't have it. We've got the opposite. We've got provisions that say racial discrimination is allowed. So Cape York Institute adopted that policy, and Noel was on the expert panel back at that time that Julia Gillard had put together. And the expert panel largely adopted Cape York Institute's proposals, including the proposal for a racial non-discrimination guarantee in the Constitution. But when the expert panel's report was published, we got a massive political wake-up call. We got huge pushback from the political right and from constitutional conservatives saying, no, this is a one-clause Bill of Rights. This is going to empower the High Court to strike down Parliament's laws. We can't have this. So you know all the usual anti-Bill of Rights style arguments. This will transfer power away from Parliament to the High Court. So faced with strident opposition from the political right, in 2013, Noel said to me, we've got to rethink this whole thing. And we went on an extraordinary process of reaching out to those constitutional conservatives who were hammering us most hard on this so-called one-clause Bill of Rights that we had proposed. And we said to them, okay, come on guys, you have to admit the Constitution has presided over a lot of discrimination. And they said, yes, it has. We just don't agree this is the right solution. So we said, well, help us find a better solution. And by the way, do you know who these constitutional conservatives were? People like Professor Greg Craven at Australian Catholic University, people like Julian Leeser, the Liberal Party guy who recently resigned from the shadow cabinet in order to advocate for the voice referendum, and people like black-letter lawyer Professor Anne Toomey, very respected constitutionally conservative experts. They said, look, we don't agree with your racial non-discrimination clause. We said, okay, help us come up with a solution you can support, but that still gives Indigenous communities what they want, which is empowering substantive reform. And that's how this alternative proposal for a constitutionally guaranteed Indigenous advisory body came about. The idea was that instead of amending the Constitution to empower the High Court to decide what's a good or bad policy in relation to Indigenous people and to strike down policies that they felt were discriminatory, instead the Constitution could empower Indigenous communities themselves to have a say, a better say right at the start when those laws and policies are being devised, hopefully to create better laws and policies, prevent discrimination and help improve practical outcomes. And ironically, I have to say, our engagement with those conservatives led us to a far better solution, a solution that was much more in line with decades and decades of Indigenous advocacy calling for greater self-determination and a political voice in their affairs. That was in 2014. Fast forward 3 years to 2017. Through the Uluru Statement from the Heart, Indigenous people forged the first ever national consensus on how they want to be constitutionally recognised. They assessed all the options. They assessed the idea of a preamble. They said, no, we don't want that. That will achieve nothing, change nothing. They assessed the idea of a racial non-discrimination guarantee. They said, no, we don't want that. And what did they ask for? They asked for one change to the Constitution, a constitutionally guaranteed Indigenous voice. Not a veto, just an advisory voice when Parliament and government make laws and policies about their communities. And astoundingly, that first ever national Indigenous consensus landed on that highly pragmatic and modest proposal. Just think about the generosity of what the Uluru Statement is offering to us when you think about the historical context. After all the history, the bloodshed, the discrimination, after everything they've gone to, they've come to us with hands outstretched and asked only for an advisory voice when Parliament and government make decisions about them. That's all. So in a few months' time, Australians are going to need to ask ourselves, do the original peoples of this land deserve to be finally recognised in the Constitution from which they were omitted in 1901? And do they deserve a guaranteed advisory voice in their affairs? That's the moral question which needs to cut through the partisan noise. I just want to say one thing about how this can unify Australia. You know, Noel always says that Australia is the sum of three stories, which brought together make us one country, Australians. There's our ancient Indigenous heritage, which is written into our landscape and flows in the veins of our rivers and seas, and a rich contemporary articulation of that ancient heritage is on display here tonight, expressed through Naomi's unique and inspiring artwork. That heritage, that art, that culture and song, that history in all its contemporary expression, that should be the pride of all Australians. It's that heritage that we're giving voice to in this upcoming referendum. It's that heritage that we're going to be recognising in the Constitution if we choose to vote yes later this year. And of course, there's also our inherited British institutional heritage, democracy, the rule of law, the principles embedded in our Constitution, which is, by the way, one of the most successful continuing constitutions in the whole world. And that's something we should be proud of too here in Australia. Our Constitution is successful, and Conservatives are right that we should protect and celebrate that. But bringing Indigenous people into the Constitution and giving them an advisory voice in their affairs, that's no threat. to our successful constitution or to our British heritage. Indeed, the concept of the voice, as I've explained, was developed with some of the country's most passionate constitutional defenders. And that's why Julian Leeser, the most hardcore constitutional conservative, he wrote in 2016, "This is the kind of machinery clause that Griffith, Barton and the other founding fathers might have drafted had they turned their minds to it." And finally, there's our multicultural achievement, the gifts of Australians from all around the world in which we all share. As the daughter of migrants from India and Fiji, whose family story has also been shaped by colonisation, I can say that there's huge goodwill amongst multicultural Australia for this cause. And that's because migrants and their descendants want to see Indigenous people given their rightful place in the Constitution. They want to see the First Peoples treated more fairly. We've come here, we've often come from poor backgrounds, we've worked hard, we've relished the opportunity and prosperity of this country, but we know the history. We know that this great democracy was built off the back of Indigenous losses, and this is the chance for all of us to give back. So let's be optimistic about the upcoming vote, but we can't be complacent. This will only get over the line if every single one of us in this room gets out there and advocates. Have the conversations, persuade people, help bust the myths, talk to your friends, family and colleagues. Have those respectful conversations, take responsibility. Because if we stand in solidarity with Indigenous people for the modest reform they seek, I think the referendum will succeed. So congratulations, Naomi. You've done amazing work here. I wish you all the best for your future, and here's to a successful referendum in a few months' time.
Incredible, Shireen. Thank you so much. Thank you for what you've just shared with us, and thank you so much for the incredible work that you've done towards this referendum. Really amazing. I'd now like to introduce Naomi Hobson. Naomi is a Kanju woman, and she comes from the small town of Cowan on the Cape York Peninsula. She's a highly acclaimed artist who works in a range of mediums: painting, photography, ceramics and film. She's currently a finalist in the prestigious Wynne Prize at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, where her work, her very large work, hangs opposite an extraordinary painting created by the late John Olsen. She's currently in Portrait 23 Identity at the National Portrait Gallery of Australia, and her acclaimed photographic series Adolescent Wonderland will be exhibited at the Horniman Museum in London in December. Naomi is also a featured artist in this month's Artist Profile magazine, which is in stores now, and I just want to acknowledge Artist Profile magazine that is supporting and filming this event tonight and sharing it with their readers. Naomi wears many hats. Not only is she an accomplished artist, she's also a very active and important leader within her community, advocating for her people and their well-being. She's the chairperson of the Southern Kanju native title body as a traditional owner representative of her country, which received their native title in 2022. And she's a member of the Joint Management of Queensland Parks, where she works with rangers, scientists and land management systems to protect the well-being of her land. In this collection, Language of Land, Naomi paints her country and her deep relationship with it using an iconic visual language and mark-making that's distinctively her own. It's the weaving of brushstroke, colour, movement and light. Her expression is a feast for the senses as she shares every way of her life and way of being, which is joyful, rich and sustainable, with a strong focus on acknowledging her maternal ancestors, customs, family and tradition, with a desire to preserve her culture and land for future generations and for all cultures to share. Naomi has an extraordinary sense of self and identity And she is a positive and infectious person that is an incredible pleasure to work with. She inspires many, and it's now my great pleasure to ask her to come and speak. Thank you.
First of all, I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight. You all look amazing. You all look beautiful. I mean, it's Friday night. You should be partying down on the wharf. So thank you for taking the time out to be here tonight with us. I just want to say thank you to Ali and the team. You do an amazing job every time to curate my show, and I just want to say thank you, and I'm very, very grateful for that. I really want to acknowledge Nolene. You know, having you here tonight, it warms the environment. You know, you connect my ancestors to yours, and it's reassuring that I'm in a good place, and my works are in a good place. So thank you. And yeah, so for those of you, I am Naomi Hobson, and welcome, welcome to my exhibition. I am an artist. I'm a traditional owner. My people are the Southern Kanju people in Cape York from my mother's side, and the Umpala Pamathampinu from my father's side. I am a land manager, and I am a person who holds dearly the culture and knowledge of my people. I am saltwater, and I am freshwater, and I am yikan. That's my skin. That's the name that my grandfather gave me. It means the hoop pine that stands strongly and proudly on my country. This is the language of the land. It pays homage to deep knowledge and the relationship that me and my people have to our country and all things on it. I find it hard to put into words my love for country and my connections that I have with my country. This is created through my culture and through my belief. To me, this is what it means to be a First People. I talk to my country, and every day it reveals something back. Can I have some water, please? Through signs and sounds in nature, I am explaining these feelings. Through these series of paintings, the language of the land I can explain. I am explaining these feelings. It is in these paintings that I can explain it literally. When I see a milky stream flowing from the springs on my country, it is telling me that this is a site of a love affair between a male-female shark, a male and a female shark. This is a special place, and this is what the paintings are about, that the water is special here. This place is special. This means we look after this place. How do we look after these places, one might ask? Well, we have to visit them. We talk to it and give it smell, and it knows our smell. Being in places like this connects me to thousands of my ancestors who sits in the very same place because we have the same smell. My country knows me. It knows I am connected to the ancient people who made these places. Right now, back home, our grasslands are in full bloom. The seeds are getting heavy. Next month, or the month after, a light rain will come from the east, over the mountains, and it will come with a strong wind. This isn't bad weather. We call it, in my language, Pacha Yukoi, or grass seed rains. This rain makes everything right, and it is telling us that the grasses will have their seeds blown off, and speed into the moist ground. So next year, and so on, we will still have this beautiful grassland and fires and all the biodiversity within it. So this is what I paint about. I paint the stories of me and my country. And to me, I am documenting all that I am through my art. I feel the deep need to document this in the detail that it is. All the little things with all its layers when you look at my paintings. Just like the thousands of generations of my people.
You take going.
That's all right. Through language, song, and ceremony, and painting. I am ancient, and I am today. And my paintings are an invitation for you to be connected to me and my people and my country. I feel, Cherie, that the voice too is an invitation to you all to improve the relationship Australia has with First People by recognising First People in the Constitution. We are resetting a relationship and a recognition that should have happened a long time ago. So let's do it. Let's do it for our country that we love, that I love. So thank you.
Wow, lucky us to have these three amazing women share their stories with us tonight. All of us at Arthouse Gallery believe that with the upcoming referendum, we have the real opportunity to unite together and modernise our nation to become a modern Australia that we can be proud of. We hope that tonight's speakers have offered new insights into the discussion around the referendum and hope that you will join us in working together with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to support a better future for them and a better future for us by supporting constitutional change and the voice to Parliament. I wish to conclude this evening by thanking Naomi Timbery, Shireen Morris, Naomi Hobson. I'd also like to thank our incredible team at Arthouse Gallery, Will, Emily, Giles and Nick for their support, together with Tim Jaffa, Naomi's husband, Arts Matters, Allegra Spender's office, and Con Goriatis at Artist Profile magazine. If you're interested in joining the community of supporters for Wentworth for the Voice, we have some QR codes and information. And we also have Peter here as well in the skull jumper to come and meet. And I just really appreciate everybody really making the time to be here tonight and have incredible gratitude for your open hearts and minds. And thank you for joining us. Thank you so much.